is Universal Parenting Clinic, your show, our show, your happiness, our excitement. Thank you for joining in today. God bless you.
Welcome to this week's edition of Universal Parenting Clinic. On this show today, we are dealing with domestic abuse or violence. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been creating awareness and lecturing on this topic and peaceful coexistence among couples in a family setting, at seminars, workshops, and worship centers. If time permits, I will show one or two clips of such. Today is the slot for our online show. However, because of limited time on the show, I will only summarize without much practical details, but it may be longer than our usual short messages because of the scope, because I will try as much as possible to answer most questions. Please bear with me, but I will advise you share this to everyone to save lives and families. The legal definition of domestic abuse or domestic violence is any incident or pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive, or threatening behavior, violence, or abuse between those aged 16 or over who are or have been intimate partners or family members regardless of gender or sexuality. Anyone could be an abuser, and anyone could be a potential victim of domestic abuse or violence. Though, depending on peculiar circumstances, some are more vulnerable than the others, and others may be in the high-risk categories. Wives are generally believed to be at the receiving end of most domestic abuses or violence, but some husbands have been silent victims too. Children are also potential victims. The abusers and the abused could be your friend, associates, colleagues, siblings, that beautiful lady, that handsome guy, the manager, legal or medical practitioner, the president, governor, teacher, pastor, or chief imam, your parent, spouse, even those preaching against it, those condemning it, that counselor, the actor or actress, the motivational speaker, anybody, even your bishop. What should be of major concern to you and all of us, however, is the fact that this menace is increasing and the consequences are beyond tolerable limits. The impact of domestic abuse on the victims and on their children is very severe and long-lasting. For instance, key statistics about domestic abuse in England and Wales shows that each year, nearly 2 million people in the UK suffer some degree of domestic abuse of different kinds. Yes, 2 million people. And in case you are also one of those assuming that it's only ladies that are victims, you are wrong. The statistics shows that of that nearly 2 million victims yearly, about 1.3 million victims are female and 600,000 victims are male. Each year, more than 100,000 people in the UK are at high and imminent risk of being murdered or seriously injured as a result of domestic abuse. 7 women a month are killed by a current or former partner in England and Wales. 130,000 children live in homes where there is high-risk domestic abuse. 62% of children living with domestic abuse are directly harmed by the perpetrator of the abuse, in addition to the harm caused by witnessing the abuse of others. This is despite several cases not being reported and despite new legislation against domestic abuse and violence. What constitutes domestic abuse and violence? Domestic abuse and violence can be in different forms. Physical abuse is the most visible form of domestic abuse. It includes such behavior as slapping, burning, beating, kicking, biting, and stabbing. The perpetrator has one major aim: to intimidate, oppress, manipulate, and cause fear to the other so as to have his or her own ways. Psychological abuse involves the regular and deliberate use of a range of words and non-physical actions used with the purpose to manipulate, hurt, weaken, or frighten a person mentally and emotionally. Sexual abuse is another. Marital rape is a form of sexual abuse, and so is the threat to have sex elsewhere if a partner cannot have sex, however, and whenever they want it. Sex based on false promises, sex without full consent are sexual abuses, and that also includes the use of force, intimidation, blackmail, or aggression, and it also includes using it as a form of power to control the other. Financial abuse or economic abuse is by way of exercising control over a person in a relationship by restricting their financial freedom, either by refusing to let the victim open a bank account, or by controlling how they use any income or benefits received, or using money in a way to force or coerce the person, the partner, to submission against he or her will, just because you are the financier in the house. Example is where a husband or wife stops feeding money unless sexually satisfied or due to other reasons, or as a way of punishment or blackmail. Emotional abuse is another form. It involves consistent pattern of abusive words and bullying behaviors that wear down a person's self-esteem, a pattern of controlling a person by using emotions to shame, blame, criticize, embarrass, or manipulate another person. Unfortunately, even though any of these forms is bad enough, but it will surprise you to know that some ladies and some men are at the receiving end of all types combined. What a calamity that will be. Generally, in whatever form, domestic abuse or violence occurs by way of controlling or coercive behaviors, both of which are aimed at depriving the victim of means to self-personal independence, resistance, and escape, seeking to regulate and control the other's behavior, which most times involves assaults, intimidation, humiliation, or threats which are targeted at harming, punishing, or frightening the victim and exercising total control over that other person. The effects or impacts of abuse includes behavioral impacts, social impacts, health impacts, financial impacts, psychological impacts, and moral impacts. The effects are of such magnitude that it could result to insanity, low self-esteem, suicidal thoughts, or actual suicide, several kinds of injuries, and deaths. The effect on children can also not be quantified. Who has responsibilities to deal with domestic abuse or violence? The truth is, everyone has that responsibility to deal with this demonic monster. Statistics have shown that several victims of domestic abuses and violence suffer greatly because of silence and inactions. Many people prefer to suffer in silence because they are fearful, intimidated, bullied, and helpless. While several people are also ignorant of their rights, means to deal with it, or ways of seeking justice and escape. We all should remember too that most people, especially children, may not be able to tell about an abuse or being abused. We all therefore have the responsibilities to report where and when necessary. Don't wait until the death of a victim to sympathize or narrate the story. You must act now, even if the victim begs against it or if the perpetrator is your ally. How do we eradicate domestic abuses or violence? The first step is to have clear understanding, knowledge of its existence. Ignorance of it and lack of understanding is a major problem. So the first step is creating awareness. For instance, in the last couple of weeks, I have been attending series of events and programs speaking on this topic in phases, as you can see here. We are all looking great, we are looking beautiful, but we don't know who is going to leave this table now and get home and is thinking, what will my husband do? What will my wife do? There are wives here who are thinking, if I get home and that man is wrong, he's not bad, he will know. Maybe when you get home, you are thinking of kicking her, rubbishing her. No, this is a woman of inestimable value. Your responsibility is to honor her. God has given her honor and has made her honorable. Another very important thing which is lacking. These people, this husband, this wife that are causing havoc on the domestic front, they are products of parenting. You want to slap a little thing, you rubbish her, shut your mouth, keep shut. Why should she keep shut? She's handmade, perfectly desired for you, created by God for you. You can also help by forwarding this video to everyone on your contact list too. Once you are aware of the existence and the danger, the next step is the ability to recognize it so as to have quick and timely intervention. Timely interventions are necessary from two groups of people. The first is by third parties, and that may include you. Third party intervention. How do you recognize victims of domestic abuse? The first step is by being observant. Some forms of abuses may not be so evident, but physical abuse or violence are usually easier to notice. Open wounds, bruises, black eyes, cuts, untreated injuries or healing wounds, lacerations, rope marks, broken eyeglasses or frames, broken bones, worrying facial or other outward appearances, moods, change in dress code from neat to rough, deteriorating appearance, and general disposition or change in behavioral pattern may be an indication which may warrant curiosity. However, any of these may also be accidental and unrelated, but should not be ignored as warning sign. It is better to get it wrong than I know. The second one is dialogue. Sometimes the signs may not be there. There are several wives and husbands who will dress very well and appear to others outwardly as happy and full of life, but are going through serious domestic abuses and violence secretly. So it is essential for close relations and associates to always ask, hope all is well. Remember, you can always confide in me. Especially, this is essential from parents, siblings, and close associates or friends. Most times, victims may give defensive excuses and become withdrawn or evasive. Never be tired of asking, especially if the feeling is very strong. Try to check on that person too, because the abuser sometimes may contain his or her movements. Don't forget the mental health handling technique. Repeat, repeat, repeat. The next step is intervention. Once you realize the fact or you have reasons to believe that someone or a child is likely to be a possible victim of domestic abuse or violence, the next step is to act. Time will not permit me to go into details on each of these steps, but I will mention few. Depending on the relationship and the category of the victim, direct engagement or intervention may be reasonable. For instance, if it's a case involving your child, close friend or sibling, and you are convinced of possible reaction and how to handle things, you can discuss it with the person and suggest ways out. Separately, in certain cases, you may also discuss with both the abuser and the victim. This is only if it is not at the advanced stage, because the next news may be the death of the victim. Be advised that though this approach does work, it may not work all the times. The next one is to seek professional help. As I said, the direct approach sometimes does not work and may not be practicable. So the best help is to inform those saddled with the professional knowledge to handle it. Report to your lawyer, to the police, your doctor, contact the local council, tell the local housing authority. You can also tell agencies, if you are a believer, the place of worship should be definitely ready to help because they have structure and guidelines in place. Your discretion is very vital, however, because the human beings occupying the different roles may not be responsible individuals. They may also not be experienced or may not be trustworthy. Some will gossip about it. Some will be indifferent. Some will be negligent. And others may take the wrong approach. Remember too, there are judges, police officers, clergymen and women, government officers and relations who are abusers and victims too.
This is Universal Parenting Clinic, your show, our show, your happiness, our excitement. Thank you for joining in today. God bless you.
So, their judgment may sometimes be biased, emotional, or sentimental. So, it may be better to follow up with 2 or more other bodies. Sometimes, too, you can discuss it with a responsible relative or friend. Now, there are a series of laws and legislations against domestic abuse and violence in different countries. It goes from domestic in many cases and countries to criminal offenses. The judges, police officers, legal practitioners, and other professional bodies need to be active in the crusade against domestic abuse or violence, even though some of them may be perpetrators and victims too. Failure to report is an offense in some places, and you may be guilty just for inaction. What is more, guilty conscience may convict you for life if that victim dies because you refused to act. The major one is the personal intervention. This is the most important intervention because most times the victims are their own worst enemy. It is difficult to help someone who doesn't want to be helped. For instance, I have seen instances when eyewitnesses informed the police of a woman who was physically assaulted and brutalized by her husband. When the case got to court, the wife denied everything. That was the end. Recently, I called the police myself with official duties because I witnessed gross domestic abuse on the wife of a very prominent man who was screaming for help. Unfortunately, the police came back to tell me there was nothing of such. The lady denied. The couple already made up, possibly had sex afterwards and fabricated strong lies, or the wife was warned and coerced. Sometimes victims are scared of the public reactions and sentiments. I have so many practical examples on this, which I can tell you from Monday to Sunday non-stop, but no time. There is this one that I know so well, so painful. The lady married this supposedly gentleman, a graduate, a choir leader. You wouldn't ask for any better. The man inflicted so much domestic abuses and violence on her from very early days in marriage. For years, so much pain. Initially, he was even collecting 100% of her salary. He was having illicit sexual affairs with different ladies. One of his escapades was even the wife of a pastor. I still have the picture of the cake he bought for her. Nobody knew because this lady concealed it for years with daily tears and pain. At the time, the scars and emotional trauma, the injuries exposed the situation. She was advised to leave so she can live. She did. Unfortunately, few weeks afterwards, the man and his parents convinced her parents that he was a changed person. The lady returned without informing me. The man became worse afterwards, a triple monster. He took her car, collected her money at will, lied to companies for loan in her name, forged her signature, several unspeakable atrocities. She was even beaten to the point that she lost a pregnancy. The lady became a living corpse. Series of physical, emotional, economic, and psychological abuses. She even became a sex slave. Till now, the man still goes with different women and even has a living-in concubine. I'm going to say this emphatically. Victims need to know that they either live to live or stay to lose. That is, you live an abusive relationship so you can continue to live and enjoy a life. Or you continue to stay and endure pain and hardship and lose your life. Forget about what people will say or what you stand to lose. I know there is no 100% perfect marriage or union because couples will have their challenging moments and issues resulting into conflict. And there may be that moment of individual madness, but there is that line of demarcation between that and abusive relationship. And every person should know the boundary and when to walk and call it quit. One of the major factors that usually prevent victims from living abusive relationship is trauma bonding. This is a strong emotional connection that develops between the victims and a perpetrator in an abusive relationship. That is where the victim has the feeling of intermittent benefits or enjoyments, dependence, or attachment. One very important step towards eradicating domestic abuse is direct active personal action of the victim. Domestic abuse or violence continues due to the collaboration and cooperation of the abused with the abuser. It is difficult to get help if you refuse to help yourself. Most of the time, the victims are quiet, timid, and afraid to speak about their experience. They have been bullied, intimidated, or warned against it by the abuser, relations, or friends. Sometimes it is the fear of the consequences or the secret fear that has been planted in their minds. The fear of being at the losing or receiving end. Sometimes it is also the stigma of public knowledge that forces them to keep playing along. Ignorance of the available steps also contributes, and so also is the intimidating status of the monster, the abuser. Please say no to domestic violence. Say no to domestic abuse. Lots of people have lost their lives, their sanity, everything because they tried to play along, to endure and keep enduring, hoping for the day the abuse or abuser will stop. But that hardly ever happens, and it may be too late if it does happen at all. Individual circumstances will dictate, but you need to deal with it. Talk to a professional counselor. Talk to your parent or responsible sibling or your friend. Report to the police. Tell your doctor the source of that wound. Call the helpline. Inform your local council. Remember, lawyers are your friends, an ally of defense at all times in moments of denials and deprivation. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying at the sign of the first misunderstanding or shout by your partner or parent, you should jump to the conclusion. No. Every relationship has its moments of turbulence and challenges. Sometimes too, everyone has his or her moments of little madness, when spontaneous reaction in frustration may seem unacceptable. Yes, talk it through with your spouse. You may listen to his or her plea that it was accidental. However, it may be the warning signal of the dangerous trend that lies ahead. If you tolerate it now and again, you will tolerate it again and again until it has become a pattern. I know many people will tell you marriage is for better, for worse. Yes, I have said that to people before, and it's also in one of my books on marriages. But abuse and violence is not on the list of tolerable marital woes. Many will advise you that your marital vows include till death do you part, that it is a taboo to divorce. That's true to some extent. But remember that marital oath does not include your spouse being incidental or instrumental to your premature death by violence or abuse. The truth The whole truth and nothing but the truth is that domestic abuse is evil. Nothing is good about it. It is good only in the mind of the foolish, satanic, barbaric, and criminal perpetrators who, because of the foolishness and insanity, sees domestic abuse and violence as a way of life, and it continues to remain because of the inaction, weakness, negligence, refusal, and failure of the violated, abused victims, and the refusal and failure or negligence of every one of us to deal decisively with it. There is nothing good about inflicting domestic abuse or violence on anyone, and nothing good in enduring and managing domestic abuse or violence in pain, fear, torment, sorrow, risk of injuries, insanity, and death. Eating you is a no. No sane man or woman will beat, inflict wounds, or any form of domestic abuse on the partner or children. It is the peak of insanity, pure madness. Don't compromise. Don't cooperate with evil. Refuse to be bullied or intimidated. If you are the abuser, check yourself, because it is foolishness raised to power 200% when an individual is himself, drills himself, slap himself, and calls himself silly, stupid, and all sorts of abusive languages, which is what you are doing when abusing your other half, with whom God and the Lord sees you as one body, or your child, who is the seed of your body. Ask for forgiveness and stop now. You can help yourself out of it. You can help yourself out of it by watching the second part of this video. Seek counseling or therapy. And if you are the victim, say no. Remember, live to live, stay to lose. Act now, not later. Report it, reject it. Act against it. Say no to domestic abuse of any kind. Tomorrow may be too late. Live to live. In the second edition, I will deal with ways to avoid domestic violence and abuse. How you can stop being violent. How couples or families can turn things around and enjoy abuse-free relationship. And how we all can eradicate, eliminate, and bury this evil monster that goes with the name domestic abuse or violence in all families. This is Universal Parenting Clinic, an N.G.O, not for profit, a charitable body, where we deal with all practical issues affecting families till I come your way again by God's grace. I am the parenting advocate in the house, Michael Benga Bibilari, MGB, Mr. Parenting. Please say no to domestic violence and abuse. Live in peace or live to live. Don't stay to lose at all. Think parenting. Be positive in parenting. Talk parenting. Be passionate about parenting. Don't just be a parent. Stop pushing. Be a responsible parent. A real parent. A parent indeed. Parent well.